Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Against the Media. This is actually episode 3, how time flies by. My first 2 episodes were mainly focused on misleading headlines in the public, whether it's from politicians, CNN, Fox News, whatever it is, WHO, CDC. I would call them out and I would give you the correct information since, like I said, they are trying to sell fear. And for those of you who actually watched the first episode, I used to call it waxing poetically, which is the term of basically just wordsmithing your way into making something sound different. So for this episode 3, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. Even though there's plenty of headlines to talk about that are misleading right now with everything going on, but I'll save that for 2 weeks. This week, I'm going to focus on the left, Democrats, what I like and dislike about them, and next week will be on the right for the Republicans, what I like and dislike about them. So I know this is already going to cause some controversy because I know there are people to the left who are so hardcore left that the left can do no wrong. I know there's people to the right, same thing, where the right can't do no wrong. Everything Trump says is the gospel. Everything Biden says is the gospel, which is just not true. And if you believe that, then you probably shouldn't be listening to this podcast because you're not going to like it. I'd like to consider myself in the middle, leaning a little bit more towards the right. So I would consider myself a moderate Republican. And for those of you who follow me on Twitter at Against Media Pod, most of the people who have followed me have been from the Ben Shapiro Twitter. So he's a conservative podcaster. I would actually say he's more moderate, but he considers himself conservative. I tend to agree with his views. So the purpose of this podcast is really to kind of shine light that just like in the articles that I think everybody should make their own opinions. They should do their own research before just taking what somebody says at face value. Like Arizona spiking cases. Well, if you actually look, it's because they're counting antibody tests and they count tests, not people. So somebody can be tested multiple times if they're in the hospital and it counts as multiple results. So there's lots of little things that we can cover, but we won't in this particular episode. So we're going to focus on what I like about the left and the Democrat side, because there's not everything I agree with the Republicans are. And there's so many little differences between the two, and I'm not going to cover over them all. I'm going to go more over like the religion aspect of it, the military aspect of it, the gun control laws, same-sex marriage, abortion, and taxes. That's pretty much like the really big tipping point between Republicans and Democrats. So rather than go over one by one, because I think that would just take forever, I'm going to just go over things that I do like and agree with. I tend to agree with on the Democratic left side. Now, it doesn't mean I agree with everything. I think, there's portions of it that I do agree with. So I will try to elaborate that on as much as possible. So one of the big things I'm going to start with that I do like on the Democratic side is I personally believe in same-sex marriage. I'm not the most religious person. Actually, I'm not even religious at all. I was raised Catholic. I did my first communion and my confirmation. I'm just not a religious person, and that's fine. So I don't really have religion drive a lot of my thinking. I just let what I've kind of been raised up around and people that I've hung out with, family, stuff like that I kind of base my decisions off of, and common sense with everything. Common sense is key. So I don't care if you're gay, straight, transsexual, binary, non-binary. I don't give a crap. That's your life. You do it what you want. If you want to get married, you can get married. If you want to adopt, you can adopt. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, I couldn't hear what you said. Oh, don't know what happened. Oh, sorry. My watch went off. So I don't care at all what your sexuality is, whether as a person or getting married. I don't care. That's your decision. And I don't think the government should be coming in and telling you what you can and can't do, which is kind of an anti-Republican thing to do because they're kind of anti-government. And for them to come in and do that, I think is kind of odd. But I think a lot of the Republican side gets driven by the religion factor of it, which is fine. That everybody has their own beliefs. But I think same-sex marriage isn't a big deal. The other things I tend to agree with, and this is the big one, and kind of uncomfortable talking about, is abortion. Now, In general, do I agree with abortion? Yes and no. It really kind of depends. There's not a flat out black and white answer on this one. So for and this kind of comes with the Planned Parenthood thing. So on the Democrat side, it's more of, oh, we can get an abortion whenever we want. Whether it's 30 weeks, 38 weeks, it's fine. And I know there's varying degrees of it, but for the most part, that's kind of how people see the left on that is you can just get an abortion anytime you want, which isn't necessarily true. The doctors have to do it. They have to agree to it. There's moral issues, blah, blah, blah. The Republicans are just flat out, no, you can't have abortions. Defund Planned Parenthood. They're terrible people. Blah blah blah. So where I sit on this is, as somebody who has a child, as somebody who's had a wife go through miscarriage at almost 15 weeks. I kind of have a different perspective because I've actually experienced this before. So the first known case of a fetus living outside of the womb is, I believe, 21 weeks, right around there, 21, 22 weeks, where it can live outside of the womb with help. At that point in time, really, you're at the 20-week mark. If you don't know whether you want to have a baby or not, then you have bigger issues. So I definitely think after the week 19, so starting with the week 20, if you don't know by then, you should not be allowed to have an abortion. Obviously, there's circumstances of if there's a life, if your life is at risk, and all the traditional stuff. Obviously, I don't think the rape thing really falls under there because hopefully you would have known before the 20 weeks whether you want to keep it or not if it was because of rape or incest. But really, it comes down to the health of the mother and the child after 20 weeks if they have to terminate. Before then, I think it's the woman's right to choose. Once again, it's kind of an odd thing, and I think this is where religion comes into play, where the government shouldn't tell you what to do, and it's a very anti-Republican thing to do. But like I said, it's a Republican, it's a religious thing that comes into play. So this all comes to the whole Planned Parenthood thing, and I think there's a lot of people out there who don't know that Planned Parenthood actually provide a lot of useful support outside of just abortions. I just don't want to have this kid anymore. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions on that. And I know there's a lot of bad people that work at Planned Parenthood with the selling of body parts and all that stuff. It's not typical. It's the news fixated on one subject, and they'll keep fixating on it, even though I know they're high up people. But they do provide services like protection, wealth and healthness, wealth and healthness checks, um, testing. They provide a lot of services that if somebody doesn't have insurance, they can actually go, especially when they're young or maybe they've been emancipated or whatever it is, they can actually go. And in my wife's case, when she had her miscarriage at 15 weeks, you have to have a D&E. It's a dilate and extraction. It's not the traditional vacuum that they do where you can just release it from your body normally. You actually have to get it extracted from you. And the hospital would not do this at all. They would not do it unless there was some sort of emergency where you're getting an infection, and so you have to then go to the emergency. No, you keep the dead fetus in you, and that's awful. And so they say you have to go to a Planned Parenthood. So my wife had to go to a Planned Parenthood in order to, when she had her miscarriage, to be able to remove the fetus. And that, it's sad in itself that most people don't even know Planned Parenthood provides that service. And they're actually key in providing that service. So I actually remember going, and it was just an awful experience for my wife. And you never forget about it, is there is people outside of Planned Parenthood protesting with religious flyers and everything, calling us names and saying, oh, you're killing your baby, blah, blah, blah. But she had a miscarriage and we had to go there. But you're shaming us. And I just think that's just ridiculous. Like, people just need to stop. Like, who cares what other people want to do? And so that's kind of where I've come up with my views on Planned Parenthood and abortions. Miscarriages are obviously different, and that's what I was talking about. But really, after 20 weeks, with the exception of miscarriages and the health and safety of the child and the mother. If you don't know by then you shouldn't be able to get one. That's just my point of view. I know that's gonna piss a lot of people off. But like I said, this comes from pure experience, and some people might not even know that's how things actually get done. So that's where I disagree with the Republicans on. You just have to be just straight out against Planned Parenthood and straight out against abortion, and that's just, I just don't agree with that. So those are two big factors that I agree with the left on. Everybody's probably thinking, "Hey, I think you're a Democrat, not a Republican," and that's not true, because those are pretty much the only two things that I tend to agree with them on. And what I really disagree with them on is big government. Democrats want government funded, government controlled everything. I always see it as, and it's gonna piss people off, but this is just how I see it: is we don't trust you, so we're gonna make the decisions for you, type of thing. And I just don't agree with that. And I'm anti big government for that reason. And have you ever seen a well run government agency? I mean, have you been to the DMV? You've seen Caltrans, you've seen all these stuff. They're just so horribly run. And why you want more government run programs, I could not tell you. And I understand government funded to some extent. You get community centers and stuff like that, but government run stuff is that's just ridiculous. And they're never good. I think the private sector always does a better job, and I think it entices them to do a better job. I'd rather see the money go to the private sector to do those things than a government run initiative. Also, with the military, Democrats tend, not always, it really just depends on the person by person basis, they decrease the funding of the military. The military is one of those things where you don't want to give too little and you don't want to give too much. So I think it's a fine balance, but I'd rather give a little bit too much than a little bit too little, because when shit hits the fan, whether it's National Guard or whether it's a war, you can't afford to ramp up. You saw what coronavirus did with trying to ramp up and play catch up. It's just too difficult. So there's some things you have to play on the more cautious side of, even though it does cost a lot of money. Gun control is another real big one. I kind of sit in the middle of this one, being former law enforcement. I don't think everybody and their mother needs an assault rifle. I don't understand the purpose of it. I understand you have the right to bear arms, and you have the right to protect your property. And I know it's in the Constitution, but the Constitution also was written a long time ago, and things aren't always applicable to today's day and age. And I understand that your Second Amendment right is what I meant to say. So, uh, However, what most people don't know is typically when assault rifles, especially, are sold in California, there's either reduced mag size or it's not an automatic rifle, which I think the news always portrays as you just hold down the trigger and it sprays. No, it's semi-automatic, it's like a pistol, basically. So there are some misconception about gun laws out there. So I kind of sit in the middle with the Democrats and the Republicans of what we should and should not have with that. That's kind of always going to be an open debate. And then taxes, I think, are probably one of the big ones. Is for taxes, I tend to agree with the Republican side, where you tax fewer. Everybody says Republicans tax more. That's not true. Republicans traditionally will tax you less, so you have more money in your pocket. So if I tax you 5% less, you have 5% more cash in your pocket. Then I will then most likely reinvest that into the economy. So if you make money, you spend money, and that's just how it is. Same thing with tax breaks for corporations. I'm actually for it. Now, I'm not for, corporations trying to deceive the tax system like Apple does with Ireland, even though they do pay their taxes here and they employ a bunch of people. I'm not necessarily for that. I understand why they do it, because taxes are so goddamn high, but I'm not necessarily pro that, and I don't necessarily support that. But I do support, incentivizing corporations, whether it's small or big businesses, by reducing corporate tax rate in order to then save money and invest back into the company, whether that's additional jobs or whether that's expansion or whatever it is. So I do agree with the Republicans on that. You don't get jobs from poor people, is basically what I say. Sorry if you hear the dogs in the background. So you're not getting, poor person, off the street isn't the one giving you a job. It's the corporations who tend to employ a lot of people, and I know small business does play a role in that as well. But they also have to make money for that, and any sort of tax break they can get does help. And on the Democrat side, they tend to tax you more because they want to support their government funded and government run programs. So I tend to disagree with that. So they kind of go hand in hand. So I kind of covered over the main core principles of the Democrats and the Republicans. And like I said, this side was going over what I like and I dislike about the left, to show that I have kind of an unbiased opinion, and I gave my rationale behind it. I don't think just because I agree with same-sex marriage, it makes me a Democrat, and that's I think what most people think. Like, oh, you're for same-sex marriage, you're a Democrat, and that's not necessarily true. You can agree and disagree with both sides, and you don't have to fall in one bucket or another. Just make your own decisions based off your own beliefs, and I think these core principles, I see it all the time, where people, they think they're one, but they actually take a political test that covers over multiple topics. They're actually the other one, whether it's Republican or Democrat. So I do encourage you to Google some political test results and run them yourself. I've posted some on my Twitter as well, and it does show I'm a moderate Republican. So, but like I said, I tend to be in the middle, and my same-sex view and the abortion view tend to skew me on the left side, and that's fine. Like I said, I'm not a religious person, so hopefully you all enjoyed this podcast. I know since most of my supporters are probably on the right side, they might not appreciate what I have to say, and that's perfectly fine. We live in America; we're all entitled to our own opinions. So it is what it is. But the next episode next week, I will go over the Republican side, what I like and I dislike, and really I've kind of gone over some of that now, but I had more of a primary focus on the Democratic side of things, the Democrat side of things. So if you haven't already, please follow me on Twitter at Against Media Pod. And please subscribe, whether it's on Anchor, Spotify, Google, Pocket Cast. I'm working on trying to get this on Apple Podcasts. It just populates slow, and it's limitations on Apple's end. So as soon as that becomes available, I'll do it. And if you guys have any topics, please feel free to reach out, and I would love to go over them. Otherwise, in 2 weeks, I'm going to go over back my misleading headlines of the week. And like I said, if you follow me on Twitter, I kind of do that on a daily basis. So I take some of what I find on Twitter, and that's what I then bookmark and use for the episodes later on. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Please share, and I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks.